Folks, welcome to the podcast. Glad you're back with us again. We're real fortunate today to have JustinShaw with us. Justin's got just a really strong business background, strong sales marketing background, does lots of things really well. Justin, kind of tell folks a little bit, for those who don't know you, tell them a little bit about what you've done in life and kind of where you are and what you're doing with fabricators these days.
Sure. Yeah, I think I won't go too far back. We did that recently on the Action Flow podcast, and we went really far back. And so I'll kind of take it from the point that relates to having an entry into the stone industry. And so prior to that, I had a growth marketing agency based in New York, and was contacted by a supplier. We're still working with them to this day, so it's coming up almost on our 7-year anniversary.
Wow.
Started working with it's kind of like their satellite. You know, they have a showroom stocked with $1 million in inventory. And they wanted us to, help them grow that side of their business. And that eventually led to working on their primary business for their fabrication side of things. And I think it was about 3 years into that we had slowly started to get referrals from friends of theirs, SFA members or, other people in their network and that were part of different groups like that they started to slowly introduce to us. And we started to see a lot of the commonalities and challenges. And so about 3 years into that, we made the decision to focus solely on the stone industry and fabricators specifically. And so that led us on a path. At that time, we were doing a lot of the things we had done previously in a growth marketing agency, where you're really operating within a lot of the digital and social channels, even some direct mail, for example, to generate demand, generate awareness, traffic, but ultimately leads and sales. But when we made the decision to enter in and niche down, narrow our focus, and only work with stone fabricators, we wanted to ask our current roster of clients what they thought about that idea. The immediate feedback was, "Are you crazy?" And actually, I just had a conversation with that client yesterday. And we just were sort of reflecting on the journey. And I was like, I should have maybe listened to some of your advice. I listened to a lot of his advice, but first, his primary thing was, "Are you really sure? And you should think about that maybe harder." you know, and I say that to say, there's a lot of constraints, a lot of challenges. That nothing in this business is easy, right? And so, he wanted me to really have an awareness of what some of the challenges would be in order for the solutions that we were providing to be successful at that time, like 3 years ago. Sorry, I'm kind of going off track here, but at that time when we made that decision, we sat down with them, and that was the first thing they said. The second thing they said was, "We appreciate that you guys do, Facebook ads and Google ads, and you want to generate leads, but shops, if you're going to go out there and approach them, they may already have somebody, or they can go and find a local provider, to do those services. You should really look at solving some real problems." And so we met with them and sort of had a bit of a roundtable discussion and made a list of the things that they felt. Is this a rated? How is this podcast rated for explicit language?
That I don't know. Whatever works.
Okay, I'll keep it. But basically, it was like they basically said, "Hey, we have all the same problems, and when we get together, we all bitch about the same things." Maybe that's still sort of PG, right?
That works. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I was like, okay, you want to know from your customers directly, what are the things, that keep them up at night? What are the persistent pains, and what are they really frustrated by? And so we sat down with them, virtually sat down with them on a Google Meet, had that call, and made a long list. And then we went through the process of kind of ticking off what are the things that are in our wheelhouse that we have experience from our prior, agency experience. And then what do I have experience prior to that in my previous career? And let's cross off the things that we just, have no experience in or don't think we can attempt to figure out. And so we shortlisted that, and we worked for free for a small group of clients for about a year to test out the various things that they wanted help with. And that really was invaluable, to learn about the stone industry, really get a lot of insights into the various challenges they were having, and implementing different things and seeing what would work over that time. And then we came away with what were our core solutions, really, and then started to expand from there to work with more shops, really around that core group of things. That was sort of the early days.
So you spent a lot of time, to kind of summarize that. You spent a lot of time in early days working on how to acquire leads, a lot of that type of activity. And then once folks have leads, what do we do with them? The sales process, the follow up, and built a lot around that. Now, are you still doing that type of work, or is there something else that you're starting to morph into?
Sure. Thanks for that. It's been quite a journey. It was from that first discussion with them, it became like this onion, and maybe we should have put more, a more established, sort of framework of, okay, this is the scope of which we'll operate in. But we were really curious, and thought, in order to discover, where we can really plant our flag and offer tangible value and solutions, let's be open. But that created this onion of, we were positioned as growth marketing agency, and that's primarily, a lot of fabricators are looking for that. We want more leads. And so that would start. And then they were like, well, we need a system to manage the leads. And so that took us down the path of, building a sales engine for them and CRM implementation. But then that led to, but people aren't following up with the leads as much, and we don't have a sales manager in place, or the sales manager is even too busy. So how can you guys help provide oversight for them? So we did that. And the onion just kept getting peeled, to even new business development on the B2B side of things. Mm-hmm. And we did that for about 3 years, and it just kept getting peeled and peeled and peeled. And where we've arrived today is we've really looked at what are the case studies where we've had the most success with specific clients. Where are those not a one-off or like a one-hit wonder where we've had success? Right. Where has success been repeated and repeated for multiple years? Mm-hmm. And how can we help more people, which has led me down to the path of, instead of us, doing full fulfillment, to then helping through a combination of an on-demand academy where they can access our trainings, our playbooks and frameworks, solutions, in combination with live coaching, and access to myself and our team, so that we can help more people at scale. We were sort of limited in our capacity when it was a done for you model, and now it's a more of a done with you model. And we're finding a lot more success in that. There seems to be more satisfaction and ownership of things when the shops that we're working with have a hand in doing the work, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Now, to clarify with the online portion of what you're doing now, still focused on sales and marketing and processes and managing those processes, or has it got some additional things?
For sure. Yeah. Thanks for leading me down that path to kind of gain more clarity. So essentially what we've arrived at is, previously we were offering something called the Sales Engine in 90-day program, which, as the name, sort of would suggest, really focused on, the generation of leads coming into your ecosystem. How are they being nurtured, followed up on? How can you create brand advocates afterwards? So it was really just focused on that area. And as we peeled the onion back a little further, we've identified that we need to take a more holistic approach. So we've evolved that program into what we now call our Growth Engine in 90-day program. And that's really to establish the foundation that a lot of shops and trade pros in general require in order to create sustainable growth. So what we've learned over years of working with shops, there are some that have been able to, we've helped everybody achieve various degrees of success. However, there are some that have been able to maintain that, and continue to grow consistently over time, incrementally.
Yeah.
But there are others that, are and it's easier said than done, but at the whims of various conditions, whether that's economic, market conditions, new entrants, competitors, and you end up on that roller coaster, right?
I
Where
call
you've
that
had a little bit of growth.
I call it the tumbleweeds method of managing a business. Yes, wherever the wind
Right,
blows,
right.
that's where we're going. Yeah.
Exactly. And so a business, we're really looking at helping to solve that problem. And that's in combination with, some of our clients working with you, working with others like Stephen at Countertop Marketing Co. It's not going to solve for everything, but it's going
Right.
to, help to ensure they're able to create a business by design and not by default.
So it sounds like you're
Um,
kind of getting into business management and some techniques around that and how people view their business. Are you kind of getting in that area a bit?
So where we start in the Growth Engine 90 Days program is to establish the foundation. We actually start with the entrepreneur themselves, and as well as key members of the leadership team. But the preparation work we have them do before they actually get into the program and start doing some of that work is really based on the transformation that they need to begin to undertake in order to be able to sustain their game. If they're planning to do this long term, or even, I know that you've got a series that you're putting together on exiting the business, that may still be 5 years out, and you still need to sustain your game to get to that point, avoid burnout, avoid, becoming complacent because you're not passionate, or the goals and the actions that you've undertaken are not directly related to long-term happiness. So you end up
So
just
does this
deciding to
series
kind of
come with a
throw in the
couch
towel.
as well? I mean, it sounds like you're getting into some pretty deep inside their head, between their ears kind of stuff. That's pretty heavy at times.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm bringing in things that are a passion of mine, and that I operated in prior to getting into starting an agency. I spent 15 years or more in the health and wellness industry. Was a personal trainer, as well as, so I always fulfilled two roles. I was, a sales director, but I was really passionate about actually, being, working hands-on with people. So
Mhm.
personal training, high performance group training,
A lot
creating
of, lot of,
programs for
lot of
people,
coaching.
a lot of coaching.
Yeah.
And in that, there is always the element of, identity transformation, because you can write up somebody a program for nutrition or for getting in the gym, but it's a matter of transforming the habits surrounding the 23 hours that they're not with you.
Yeah.
Right, and then they come see you. That creates all the friction to them actually, being able to be successful in what you prescribe for them. So very similar to that, a holistic approach in, some of the things that we're providing for them are designing their best year ever, their perfect week, growth habits, mindset shifts and transformations they need to undertake, and really mapping out their core vision and who do they want to become, where do they want their business to transform to become, and really mapping those things out first before getting into the actual tactical things. So yeah,
So yeah, it sounds like what you're doing is putting a lot of meat on the bones of this concept of moving from working in your business as a templater or an installer or a salesperson, whatever, to starting to think about what is your business separate from you. How is that going to be a vehicle for getting you where you want to go, and really working on the business? Is that a fair statement?
ideally, and that's
Yeah.
that's where we've got three stages that we're helping people to go through. One is to set that foundation, moving them from what's been, and this may ruffle some feathers, and it's just labels, they kind of help us to identify, but
Yeah.
organic growth, right? Organic growth, accidental growth. Sometimes we grow in spite of ourselves, and that's okay. And then, or we've plateaued, right? And I say organic growth or accidental, and that doesn't mean that, entrepreneurs or the owners of shops haven't been intentional about certain activities. But when we don't have control, over predictable outcomes, it's still relatively organic. And then you'll lead to plateauing and hopefully avoiding the worst case scenario, which is not only plateauing, but then one step forward, two steps back kind of thing, right?
And I think
So
that this concept of control is really strong, because I think if you talk to a lot of the, especially smaller fabricators, they'll tell you they'll feel like they don't have control over anything. Whereas the fabricators who have gotten much larger, more successful, I think have realized that they have to decide to control certain aspects of their business. Is that kind of what you're seeing?
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. So that foundational element has them focus on, and we've broken into three sort of phases, is to first strategize. So first doing an assessment, identifying, how have they previously performed? What's the current state of affairs? What do they require for growth? Then that can be numerous things, whether it's financial investment, new talent, different skills and capabilities, for example, technology and tools. So really doing an assessment first and then moving into the core vision. That's what we call it. So identifying the core vision that comes from the entrepreneur. But then as you relate that into what is going to be we take it as, once they identify the core vision, they name it something else. So that might just be, ABC Granite's business in 2027, right? So that's just the future state. And they create the statement for that and the documentation for that to help be the North Star. In that, we look at things as well as not just their core vision, but then you start to bring in key team members as to where do they see themselves going, in the organization. What is their ideal future state in the business? How do they want to, spend their day to day, and incorporating that so that the entrepreneur and other higher, if there are senior members, if it's just, one person right now, then it's still building it out for those key team members that they envision having in the future.
Right.
Because that's really important to create that pathway of success for those key team members, build a culture where it's not just for profit or for the outcome that satisfies only the needs of the business owner, so that everybody's really invested in creating those outcomes. And then we move to the strategic growth game plan. So that's really just the first phase of that foundational layer.
So question for you. It's all good stuff. I think it's definitely needed in businesses, especially in small businesses. One of the challenges this takes some time to do what you're talking about. It takes some thought, takes some time going through whatever schedule, plan, mechanisms you've got set up. What I'm wondering is, for the small shop, small being a relative term, but for the shop owner who is really just totally consumed by their business, who knows that they want to make these types of changes in their business. How often do you run into people who simply can't make the time for this? And then how do you overcome that barrier and help give them ways to generate the time to work on this? What are some of the tools, techniques, approaches that you take that maybe people can take away from this podcast? They can start thinking about themselves to start down a discovery journey like this.
Yeah, great question. So we can give something tangible they can take away. So that really comes in that prep work phase, and you nailed it, because as we peel back those layers of the onion that we talked about of how we've arrived where we are here now today, is without removing that constraint, because that's so often the problem, right? It's kind of the chicken and the egg, is in the preparation work. Two of those key components that we've adopted and provided and then help them to go through is reclaiming their time. That's one of the first things that needs to be done to be able to take any of the actions on what we're providing. So there's a couple of different frameworks that we provide, and a great book that people can go out and read and follow. That book is Buy Back Your Time by Dan Martell. And then Dan Martell, the kind of quick takeaway from that is you've got these 4 quadrants. And if you had, I don't know if this will, just in audio, you've got 4 quadrants, and In the lower left-hand quadrant, you've got the delegation quadrant, right? These are the things that, drain the business owner. That can be everything from auditing QuickBooks, for example, right? Things like that are just a nightmare, to kind of spend your time doing, and drains the business owner and doesn't necessarily impact growth or revenue generating tasks. And as you move through the 4 quadrants, without going through all of them right now, you want to get to the really working on the things that impact the business, generate revenue, and energize you or light you up as a business owner. So that's one of the great. It's a great read. It's a very actionable read, and one of the things that we cover. And he has a formula for how you calculate it, in terms of what your buyback rate is, what you can afford to actually pay somebody, so that you can move those delegation tasks off as quickly as possible. And kind of the whole, big idea there is you're hiring to buy back your time versus hiring for growth.
Right.
And I kind of have like a little asterisk beside that in our trainings, and is that, yeah, if you need to hire an installer, you're not going to skip that in terms of hiring like an executive assistant, because they're not going to fulfill that need.
Right.
But, that's kind of obvious. But if you're still, adopting that mentality that he has, you're really looking at being able to free the business owner up to do the things that, fascinate them, motivate them, light them up, and that directly impact growth. So that's one of the frameworks that we provide and have people go through before they do anything else. Go ahead, Eric. Sorry.
Just as you're talking, there's 2 questions that come up. I'm thinking as a shop owner is listening to this. One is this concept of delegation, giving someone else the responsibility for doing something, also giving them a well-defined box of authority within which to operate, and then how they manage that. Are you finding that the shops that you're working with, or the owners, are able to do that well, or is that still a barrier for them? And if it's a barrier, what do you find is a good way to overcome it?
Yeah, I think, I mean, that book really does get after that. And, and so he's got, I think it's the buyback loop. So you have to continue to audit. It's an ongoing, I use it myself. It's an ongoing process because, the very first thing is starting to actually, and so we have the owners go through that, create that action plan, and we act as accountability partners. So that's really, one of the biggest parts about this is, if it was just information, they wouldn't necessarily be able to be successful. But acting as an accountability partner, we're really there to see that certain things we use the word installed, as an industry term, so that
it's the execution. Yeah,
exactly. So that by that date, they've gotten 5 things, on that list. Okay, those are going to be delegated out. They've found the person to do that. They've got a plan to hire for. We're there to help them do that. We're also there to help ensure that they don't fill that time with other things that are really just in the first 2 quadrants, and that they're really filling those things with the 3rd and 4th quadrant. But you have to repeat that on an ongoing basis. It really is something you have to audit. That typically we say every like 30 days at the beginning until you get really good at it.
Yeah, part of delegation definitely is doing the follow-up and making sure things are being done the way you want them to. I think the biggest challenge I see shop owners struggle with is that fear of giving up control, because things won't be done as well as I can do it. It won't be done as quickly as I can do it.
For sure.
And that's really a big barrier. But it sounds like what you're doing is helping them decide to carve out a small amount of time. You're helping them decide what to fill that time with productively, so they can in turn free up more time to do the stuff that they need to do, which I think is a great approach. The formula that you mentioned from the book, is there a quick summary of kind of the major factors in that formula for deciding, got a shop owner who really needs to free up more time, so they're going to maybe hire a bookkeeper to do invoicing and receivables and some things like that they probably do on their own. It takes up a lot of their time. Can you kind of give us just a quick summary of what that formula looks like for making a decision?
Yeah, I think I'll further simplify it. So what we do in our program is we've ultra simplified it in case people don't have time to read the book. So people that are in our program, we send out the books to them so they can have more context, right? And, get as deep as they want to go on that. But nature of the game is they may have no time to even crack it open. And we've got to get, the first steps towards solving aspects of this problem, right? Which is a persistent problem. Not enough time, not the ability to focus on working on the business. So in that book, there's a whole ascension ladder of and a whole protocol you go through of what are the tasks you should be looking to remove first, and then moving from there. So you can identify, okay, and not skip steps. However, we've really oversimplified it and combined it with, it's the ABC model from Dan Sullivan, which he wrote a very short book on. I don't even know if it's a physical book. If he does, it's just a quick PDF because he cranks out material like there's no tomorrow. But, it's available on Audible, probably available, just to Google it and you'll find the PDF for that. We've combined that with the buy back your time principle. And so the ABC method from Dan Sullivan is you've got these three, it's not a Venn diagram, you've got these three circles of varying degrees of size, and it's very simple. A tasks are those that irritate you. And I think they're labeled in red, right? The ones that really get under your skin. And we all immediately viscerally know what those are as listeners are listening to this. Immediately those come to mind.
Doing your taxes.
B tasks. What's that? Yeah.
Doing your taxes.
Yes, exactly. Right now, I've got that as well. I mean, we've got that. We outsource that, but they still need stuff from me. And even though I've got that to where I do 5% of it, it still irritates me.
Absolutely. Classic example.
Totally. So that for me is a mindset thing. I look at it like, okay, I've still got this 5% and I should be grateful that I get to do taxes at this nature, of this magnitude now, and be grateful for that. But the B tasks that fall into that category are the ones you're okay with. And then C are the tasks that fascinate and motivate you. And we could talk about that later because that, or not at all. But we're just going to focus on, if you're asking how do you keep that as simple as possible, start making the list of the A tasks. What are the ones that really irritate you? And I think that's a good compliment to what Dan, well, they're both Dan's, right? What Dan Martell did in Buy Back Your Time. The delegation quadrant might not scream at you things. And that for the business owner, they may just leave those things on there. Yes, they're the things that I should delegate, just kind of getting the report out of SPS, right? Okay, I should delegate that. And it just stays on the list and there's not enough urgency to move that thing. So we really focus on starting with what are the ones in the A category that really irritate you, get under your skin, cause you to, when you start that in a day, the rest of your day is just awful, right?
So can we talk about the financial formula just for a second, though?
I was just going to jump into that.
In their A category is the bookkeeping. Just use that example, and they really need the what they need to do is make a decision to hire a bookkeeper. How do they? You mentioned earlier that Martell talks about how to value your time against the cost of hiring that bookkeeper. Is there kind of a financial calculation there that we can share with folks?
Yes, exactly. That's what I was going to say. So you identify those, and then the buy back your time rate that you calculate is your total income earned. And not to get too technical, and I might need you to help clean this up a little bit, is as entrepreneurs, we may be doing certain things to optimize our finances and, different expenses that fall under that category that really should go under income. So you're looking at all of those items as well. So let's say it's 100K that you put for total income. That amount, if we've got that, if we were sketching this out, is divided by, and he puts it at the average of 2,000 hours a year. So 52 weeks times 40.
Yeah.
So it's the 100,000 divided by the 2,000, and then divided by 4, the ROI you want to get on outsourcing, transferring the task.
Okay, so your 100,000 divided by 2,000 is $50 an hour. So you're going to divide that by 4 is going to be $1,250.
Yes. So that's one of the areas where, if you got your math right, where as you get to different places, if you're starting at a really entry level and you've got those really irritating tasks, the thing that I find often is in personal usage and our clients that are using that is that rate might feel quite low at times. And either you need to get creative about that in terms of how you're going to be able to make that happen. Or I've created some wiggle room, around that hard rule of the 4 times ROI,
Yeah.
and so when we're talking with our clients about that, first of all, the reality of the situation is none of them have time to calculate the ROI at 4 times to know. I mean, it's just, we don't have time for it.
Yeah.
We have a general sense of looking at that. We have our gut. And then we could take some simple measures to see, are we getting a positive ROI? For myself, and when we're working with our clients, I'm pretty happy if it's 2, 2.5, or 3.
Yeah. Yeah.
On this,
That sounds pretty reasonable. Yeah.
Yeah. And then when you get to the other things, when you're looking at, okay, if I'm the one that's still going out doing, taking the pro liner out and going and doing that, okay, well, then that's a task that, I mean, maybe that does fall in the A category and really irritates certain owners where they've been like, I've been doing this for 20 years. At this breaking point, I no longer want to do this. And it really, gets me that I have to do this. Okay. That's not going to be a 1250, right, task. But in Dan's book, that's not going to happen right away. That's not the immediate thing you're looking at. You're looking at those things that probably do fall in the 1250, 1750 an hour range if you sort of manipulate the ROI on that calculation. But when you go through the ladder and you move to those things like template or installer, somebody managing on the actual floor, you're going to see that the calculation is going to change, where that hourly actually can be at the $50 an hour rate, but it is an ascension. You're earning more, you've freed up time more, your business is growing more, you're profiting and paying yourself more, and then the calculation starts to shift. But that's,
and as we talk about this, that 4-to-1 payback, I think I'm glad to hear that you're flexible on that, because I'm thinking in terms of, all right, that's the cost side of things. And in reality, trying to find a really good bookkeeper, if that's what problem we're trying to solve to free up the shop owner's time, you're going to spend $20, $30 an hour to find a good bookkeeper, depending on where you are geographically and, whether you're in a city or rural or whatever. And in some places you can't even find one. But I'm thinking in terms of, okay, even if that payback is 2-to-1 or even less, the value of freeing up that shop owner's time so that they can work on putting together sound strategies, sound systems for growing and managing their business, the upside, even in the near term, of being able to do that kind of work on their business is worth so much more than the cost of hiring that bookkeeper in this example. And so I guess the point, from my perspective, looking at businesses and the recommendations I make to businesses, the 4-to-1, I know, the guy's an expert, he's written a book, okay, and I get it, but I think really focusing on what the benefit of that is probably is
totally
an even stronger argument than looking at the cost side of things, because while you want to make decisions that make you money, improving your ability to make money, improving the way that you run your business. I like to tell folks all the time that your business is running exactly the way you've designed it to run.
Yeah.
If you don't like the outcome, it's because that's how you've set it up. And so if you want to change that, you got to do the stuff that you're talking about. You've got to start thinking about where you are, where you want to go, what kind of changes you need to make, what kind of processes you need. And that takes time and effort. And if you're already burned out doing the day-to-day stuff, working in your business, that's a hard shift. And so making some small steps to free up time to do this, even if the payback's only 1-to-1, I think is really worth it, because without it, you're stuck doing the same thing forever.
Exactly. Yeah, I was just gonna say, even at a 1-to-1, I've got our clients have some that are 1-to-1, but you'd have to get deeper on it. I can't remember. I read the book a while ago and we've distilled it down to a simple framework, right? We need to be able to give shops you read nothing, it's in 2 slides, apply this, let's go, and then reapply it. But I think if I was to create sort of a holistic, formula, not to get too mathematical about it, you have to think about energy and happiness. Like if we were to then, okay, if it's 1-to-1 match compounded by energy and happiness, I'll take that every day. To get those things off my plate that cause me not to show up in the business as my best self, or for our clients to just, before they hit the sales meeting, they're burnt out and frustrated, right?
Or cause you not to show up at home as your best self.
100%. Absolutely.
Folks, we had so much fun talking with Justin Shaw that we went on and on and on. So we felt like it's probably the best approach to just go ahead and break this into 2 parts. So stay tuned for part 2 of our conversation with Justin Shaw.